It's mean, it's ugly, and it's the aircraft ground troops call on first when they're caught in a jam.
They were taking fire and needed immediate support.
Its weapon of choice, the most powerful Gatling-type cannon in the Air Force inventory.
It's capable of firing 70 rounds per second.
They are threatened just by the sound of the airplane.
The A-10 Thunderbolt is the aircraft that changed the definition of close air support.
Every aspect of how we put the A-10 together was like a radical innovation.
It's caused more controversy than any other Air Force fighter.
The A-10 seemed to violate every precept of streamlined, high-speed design.
And some of its toughest battles were against the very people who brought it to life.
The Air Force had no intention of deploying the airplane.
In 2012, Operation Enduring Freedom, Afghanistan. NATO has been waging war against the Taliban for 11 long and deadly years. Over 60,000 U.S. soldiers have boots on the ground. The A-10 Thunderbolt is there too.
The A-10s have been an integral part of the operation since the beginning.
Lieutenant Colonel Paul Zerkowski was commander of an A-10 squadron in Operation Enduring Freedom.
We provided pretty much 24-hour coverage with the A-10, where we had airplanes airborne just about all hours of the day and night.
In May, President Barack Obama announces that Operation Enduring Freedom will soon come to an end.
We're now unified behind a plan to responsibly wind down the war in Afghanistan.
Coalition forces count down to a time when they can leave the war far behind. But the Taliban has other plans. They don't intend to let the Americans get out alive. June 2012. At Bagram Airfield, Zerkowski and his wingman prepare their A-10s for flight. But moments after takeoff, the routine mission turns into something more.
We were re-rolled to what is called troops in contact. That meant somebody on the ground was taking fire, and they were requesting support.
That somebody is a 90-member special operations team. They're returning from a mission deep in Taliban territory.
They were working up a spine or a ridge line between two rivers to a helicopter landing zone where they had planned to be picked up. They were complete with their mission. They just needed to get up the spine and get on a helicopter to go home.
2 miles below the pickup point, the team is ambushed by Taliban fighters. Now, the safe haven of the landing zone might as well be 1,000,000 miles away.
At that point, there's so much gunfire on the ground, they can't even bring the helicopters in yet.
The soldiers on the ground are completely surrounded. To get out alive, they have just one hope: the A-10.
There were 90 guys on the ground that were threatened by enemy fire, and it was an imperative that we get in there and help them. At that point, we just pushed it up and got there as quick as we could.
When Marines and Army troops are overwhelmed by the enemy, they want just one aircraft, the A-10.
What we got here is the A-10 Thunderbolt II, more commonly known as the Warthog, or just the Hog by those who fly it.
The Warthog. It's the ultimate gold standard for close air support.
Close air support is protecting troops on the ground. We work closely with those troops to make sure that they're able to effectively operate safely on a complex battlefield. And we got some great firepower to help them do it.
Great firepower is the A-10's specialty. The Warthog is basically a gun with an airplane attached.
The A-10 gun is called the GAU-8 Avenger. or just the gun by A-10 pilots. It's 21 feet long. It's the heaviest gun, automatic cannon mounted on aircraft. It weighs more than 4,000 pounds when it's fully loaded.
The Avenger's magazine holds over 1,000 rounds of 30mm ammunition, spit out at 70 rounds per second.
It's effective enough to kill armored vehicles, tanks, armored personnel carriers, all the way down to small, soft point targets. We can use it against moving targets, we can use it against static targets, we can use it against buildings. Pretty much everything that a really powerful gun can be used for, we use it against.
The gun isn't just powerful, it's precise. 4,000 feet above the ground, the Warthog can strike within 40 feet of its target.
You can be assured that anything within that 40 feet is not going to have a good day.
The A-10's 30mm cannon is only part of its payload package.
The A-10 can carry a mix of ordnance. Pretty much anything the Air Force produces, we can hang on the bottom of this jet and use in our close air support mission. The outer pylons are reserved for lighter ordnance, specifically air-to-air missiles. As you move inboard, we mount sensors, flares, and some rockets out on the outer pylons. As we move in towards the center of the plane, we can carry heavier ordnance, so air-to-surface precision-guided missiles. And the bombs are most commonly loaded on the inboard station. This right here is known as a triple ejector rack. So the TUR can carry 3 bombs, 500-pound each. It can also put rocket pods with 7 rockets each on these stations. So you can picture the variety and number of ordnance that the A-10 can carry into the battlefield environment.
It's not going to win any beauty contests, but for generations of soldiers, the A-10 and its pilots have been a lifesaver.
If I do my job correctly, more American men and women are coming home safely at the end of the day.
In Afghanistan, Zurkowski and his wingman fly fast through the mountains. It takes just minutes to get to the firefight.
When we first arrived, we had other assets on station that were supporting the mission. There was a AC-130, an MC-12, and then there was a B-1 that was above him.
The A-10 soon discovered that trouble isn't just on the ground. It's in the air, too.
There was a pretty good cell or rainstorm that was developing. The enemies tactically used this to their advantage, so they had waited for the weather to roll into the valley before they started to shoot.
As the weather rolls in, coalition planes are forced to fly lower and lower, or risk crashing into a cloud-covered mountain. For the A-10s, flying low is no problem.
We had the capability to work in poor weather. We had the capability to work at low altitude and provide fire support to the guys on the ground when they need it.
But the other planes are designed to fly high and fast. Navigating the rain clouds is too much of a risk.
At that point, there wasn't enough room underneath the weather where they could operate safely. They, one by one, started to check out because they couldn't provide any support.
By now, the A-10 pilots can barely see the ground.
Operating in that rainstorm was very challenging. When it starts raining, you can't see as far in front of you, and your sensors can't see through the weather either.
In order to locate the ground troops, A-10 pilots have to rely on their ground-to-air radios. For most fighters, this could be a challenge, but not for the A-10s. The Warthog is optimized to communicate directly with troops on the ground.
Close air support missions start with detailed integration between aircraft and ground troops. In order for us to do that, we need to be able to talk to them. So my tools are 3 radios that I have by my left hip here that allow me to talk to and coordinate with pretty much everyone.
A Warthog pilot can tap into 3 different radio networks. The first allows them to speak with troops on the ground. The second network is dedicated to talking to the other aircraft. The A-10's third radio network connects it with a JTAC, or Joint Terminal Air Controller. That's an officer on the ground who oversees the entire offensive operation.
The radios are crucial to the execution of close air support so that we can understand, we can integrate, and we can adjust to dynamic battlefield environments.
Over Afghanistan, Zurkowski and his wingman radio down to the troops. The news that comes back isn't good.
The troops on the ground said they were taking fire, and they were taking fire from the north and from the west.
Zurkowski and his wingman are reluctant to use their cannon. If they can't find the troops, they risk shooting their own soldiers.
It's very difficult to see the actual personnel in the kind of rocky terrain, and they're all wearing camouflage and they blend in pretty well.
By now, the news from the ground is urgent. The Taliban is closing in fast.
It was critical we provide support, or it was likely that they would be overrun, and there were 90 lives at stake on the ground there.
If the A-10s don't shut the enemy down soon, it'll be too late. 2 A-10s circle low through the mountains of Afghanistan. Below them, 90 Special Operations troops are surrounded by Taliban soldiers.
So at this point, it is starting to rain a little harder, and my confidence level in the target wasn't as high as I wanted it to be.
Visibility is almost zero. Coordination with ground troops will have to be perfect to avoid friendly fire. Zurkowski radios down to the soldiers and comes up with a plan.
I elected on my first pass to put down a white phosphorus rocket. The rocket that hits and it produces a big cloud of smoke, and it's a great reference point on the ground.
The rocket works perfectly. Ground troops radio up to help Zurkowski refine his target.
They corrected off of the rocket on the ground as a reference, requested 30 millimeter just north of the rocket impact.
It's time for the A-10 to go in for the kill.
So I came around for a second pass. I put about 300 rounds on the ridgeline just north of the rocket. In that type of weather, you can see a disturbance in the air of where the bullets are. So you can't actually see the bullets, but you can see kind of a wave in the air of disturbance of where this mass of metal's going down range.
The A-10 makes another pass. It can't see through the clouds to tell if it's hit its target, but ground troops radio up the good news.
On the last pass, they were confirmed that, yeah, just hit your last impacts. That was effective.
Finally, 2 rescue helicopters are cleared to land.
It was a very successful mission. We got everybody out that day. There were 90 people on the ground.
Tenacity, toughness, reliability, hallmarks of the Air Force's go-to plane for close air support.
It really highlighted the capabilities of the A-10 in terms of being able to operate underneath the weather, being able to provide accurate pinpoint fires to support the guys on the ground.
Not bad for a weapon that some say the Air Force never wanted at all. 1965. The U.S. Air Force and the Army are at war. Not just in Vietnam, but with each other. It's a battle that's been brewing for years.
The Air Force had had a very close relationship with the Army during Korea, but as the 1950s and early 1960s progressed, the Army and the Air Force moved farther apart.
Rebecca Grant is an Air Force historian and defense analyst.
During World War II, close air support was one of the primary missions for the Air Forces. But in the 1950s, the nuclear mission took over, and close air support was neglected.
The Air Force believes that close air support is a thing of the past. Future wars will be won by air power alone.
The Air Force thought that the next war would be all about nuclear deterrence and nuclear strike, involving masses of bombers and also intercept fighters, but with very little role for ground forces.
To fight this new war, the Air Force puts all their money into fast bombers, designed to counter the nuclear threat.
The new fighters were designed either as interceptors or to deliver nuclear weapons. That meant that there really weren't any aircraft in the 1950s designed specifically for the close air support mission.
The Air Force doctrine looks good in theory, but the reality of Vietnam catches them off guard. In the jungles of Southeast Asia, ground troops are an essential part of the war. high-flying Air Force fighters struggle to provide support.
As more U.S. troops ended up in Vietnam, the Air Force realized that they'd really let their abilities in close air support slip.
As the casualties pile up, the Army feels that it's been left out to dry. So it comes up with a bold plan to make the close air support mission its own. June 1966. The U.S. Army reveals its plan for an attack helicopter. They call it the Cheyenne. It's a close air support platform designed to put Air Force bombers to shame.
With the Cheyenne program, this was the Army's initiative to do close air support their way, on their own.
The Cheyenne is fast. It's heavily armed, and it's very expensive. The Air Force looks on with alarm. If the Cheyenne program goes through, they could lose the close air support mission altogether and the budget that goes with it.
So the Air Force reacted to the Cheyenne program by starting a new program of its own.
September 1966, the Pentagon. General John P. McConnell starts a new Air Force initiative, the Attack Experimental Program.
McConnell was a 100% bomber guy. He had no interest in close support, but he sure didn't want to go down in history as the chief of staff who lost a major mission for the Air Force.
Pierre Sprey is a defense analyst and engineer. He wrote the initial requirements for the A-10.
The objective we were given was to develop a really effective combat machine at very low cost, lower cost than the Cheyenne, and more effective.
Vietnam isn't the only war that has the Pentagon worried. Soviet tanks line up along Europe's Cold War battlefield, waiting to strike. The new aircraft will have to do double duty, protect soldiers and destroy the Soviet threat.
For the U.S. Air Force, having a dedicated tank-killing, close air support ground attack plane was absolutely essential.
Standard Air Force doctrine gets turned on its head. Forget high and fast. This new plane has to hold enough fuel to hang over the battlefield as long as troops need.
First and foremost, you got to be able to get in close enough to find the targets. So we demanded an airplane with a lot of loiter time. 2 hours or more was essential.
To hover low and slow, the new plane will have to be tough.
The second thing is you had to have an airplane that could really withstand hits from machine guns, small cannons, and even shoulder-fired missiles. You needed an airplane that could take those hits and get the pilot back.
Finally, you need firepower, lots of it.
You need firepower that's precise. This has to be firepower that will suppress the bad guys, get rid of them, and not hurt your guys. And this has to be able to punch through tanks or armored personnel carriers.
A request for proposals goes out in May 1970. This aircraft will be far different from anything the Air Force has ever produced.
Almost every aspect of how we put the A-10 together was like a radical innovation.
4 months after its request goes out, the Air Force chooses 2 finalists, Grumman's A-9 and Fährchild Republic's A-10. Each submits a prototype for a fly-off competition.
The Air Force had built many, many prototypes over the years, but had never had a head-to-head shooting fly-off where the airplanes would directly compete on the same ground against the same targets. That was totally new.
December 1972, Edwards Air Force Base, California. Fährchild Republic's A-10 faces down Northrop Grumman's A-9. In maneuverability, loiter time, and weapons tests, the stakes are winner takes all.
The A-10 was clearly more accurate than the A-9 in strafing and in bombing, but not by 2 to 1, but by enough that we cared. It was also much better in loiter time because the A-9, Grumman had lost control of the weight of the airplane. And then on the survivability side, the A-10